let me start by saying this is going to be a pretty sobering talk, and it'll be sobering for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to Linda, and it'll just get more sobering. We're talking about, as Mary said, modern-day slavery. Modern-day slavery. 150 years ago, we had the passage of the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery, and in the United States, just in the United States today, we have more slavery than we ever did at any time in our history. Worldwide, there are 20.9 million people enslaved. 20.9 million people involved in this terrible thing called human trafficking. It is the second largest illegal operation in the world. It's $150 billion a year. It is second only to the drug trade, and it is growing faster than the drug trade. 2/3 of that $150 billion goes into the trafficking for sex. $100 billion involved in sex trafficking. I mean, that's a very, very sobering number. If you think, as most of us grew up, and you have that milk carton, and on the side of the milk carton was a child's face. And I used to see these 25 years ago. And I can remember looking at them and be a little 6-year-old. 6-year-old girl, 6-year-old boy, and you'd think, well, they've run away, or they've been kidnapped, or something happened. But based on what I know today, that 6-year-old is 31. They've been in a brothel in India, or a brothel in one of the stands in Europe, or in a truck stop out here on Interstate 20. And they're never getting out of it. They're never going to get out of it. They're drugged. They're used. And we're doing very little to stop it. As a matter of fact, we're just now becoming aware of what a tremendous cancer it is in our society. There's an organization, well, let me back up for just a minute. I've been involved in this for almost 12 years now. My wife and I were in England. I was the chairman and CEO of an international bank. And at that time, I made the acquaintance of a gentleman by the name of Ron Noble, who was the head of Interpol at that time. And we just started talking about, from my background, what are the terrorist activities? And all of a sudden, it became very obvious that his real concern was this growing cancer called human trafficking. And as a result of that, in those conversations, I became involved with the former director of the FBI by the name of Louis Freeh. And Louis Freeh and I, along with some people that I'm going to mention in just a little bit, came together and said, we need to attack this. And we need to attack it in a holistic manner. Right now, the fight against human trafficking is done in stovepipes. And the stovepipes are good, not bad. Don't get me wrong. There's a stovepipe that says we're going to take care of those who we recover. And then there's a stovepipe that's going to focus on, we're going to do something with the prosecution. And then there's a stovepipe on what are we going to do about closing down known locations. And everybody's working those and doing a great job of it. But there was no holistic effort that combined all of those, that did what is critical, and that is to disrupt the business of human trafficking, to disrupt the business of human trafficking. Human trafficking works on a risk-reward equation. The risk is very low, and the reward is remarkable. People are making hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and getting away with it. You find a brothel that is hit by the police, and who do they pick up? The women. The women. And they bring them in, and they put them in jail, and they post a bond, and within 2 hours, guess who's there to get them out? The pimp, who's the controller, who owns them. Why are they getting them out? Because they don't want them out of their sight. They get them out, and they're right back into the situation. Nobody is punishing the pimp. Nobody is punishing the John. The vast majority of the effort is pointed towards the women who are being trafficked. You know, that's got to stop. That's part of the equation. That's part of that risk-reward equation. The business is basically made up of, one, getting a hold of the individual to be trafficked. In other words, getting a hold of the slave. It then involves trafficking, transporting the slave. It then involves the advertisement of the product, and then it involves the exploitation. That's the business cycle, and that's what we're trying to disrupt. We've done a lot of study, we've talked to a lot of people, and one of the most, probably the saddest comment I ever heard, and I heard it, and Linda was there when we heard it, was a group of women who got up and were talking about the women in trafficking. And they said, it's great. People cheer and applaud when one of these women is recovered. And we all do, and we're thankful that they're recovered. And then she paused and said, just understand that when I came off of the street, there was an immediate movement to get my replacement. So for all the success we see, this is so insidious that one comes off and they just go out and grab another one. It is, and I think Mary hit the nail on the head, this is not something that is demographic in nature. They're not looking for the poor individual who doesn't live in Mountain Brook. Our children are at risk. Your grandchildren are at risk. They go to the mall and they get out of your sight, but they get out of the sight of a friend, and they can go like that. And once they're gone, you're not going to recover them. The chances of recovery are very, very slim because they move through the system so fast. Now, the scary part for you and for me is that Birmingham sits at the crossroads of the two main trafficking routes in America. Interstate 20, coming out of Atlanta, going west, and Interstate 65, going north-south. Those two roads intersect in only one place in this entire nation, and it's Birmingham, Alabama. And if that shouldn't scare you, I don't know what does. Because what that says is if we lose one of ours, they go so fast, they're on the road so quickly, that the chances of recovery are slim and none. What Linda and I are involved in, and what Louis Free and a large group, and when I talk about a large group of very, very powerful individuals, we're talking about the CEOs and chairmen of major banks, the CEO and chairman of major railroads, CEOs and chairmen of the major airlines, CEOs and chairman of, as an example, any institution that moves money. the government, senators, congressmen. A good example, we had Cindy McCain with us. You just have a whole lot of people who have come together to form, under the auspices of Human Rights First, which is no politics involved. They are focused primarily, and once they get that focus, it's a rabid focus on issues that involve the health and safety of our children and things that involve human rights. They are the sponsoring organization for this group of people who've come together in Washington, D.C., and have published and have built something called How to Disrupt the Business of Human Trafficking. And it is a document that has been given and will be given to every single presidential candidate, and we will be meeting with every candidate for the President of the United States in order to drive home what we find and feel are the three major ways to disrupt that trafficking. I'm not going to go into any great detail. I'm just going to give you the titles of what needs to be done. You're going to get, as Mary indicated, you're going to hear from somebody about improving prosecutions. We have got to make the penalty worth the crime, and right now it is not. It is not. Secondly, we have to be able to pull the financial levers to make the reward minimal. Right now, for every $150 that a trafficker makes per young person, we collect probably 8 cents. I mean, they have no fear. They have no fear. And then finally, you have to get a partnership of all of those organizations that I've talked about to ensure that what they're hiring are not slaves. And we have a lot of that going on in the country too. At the end of the day, it is the risk-reward that we're worried about. This is an issue that should impact every one of us. We should get ourselves exercised about it. We all have lots of things to do in our life, but this is something that is a cancer. It is not getting better, it's getting worse. And we're sitting at what might be the aorta of the trafficking transportation network. And so we at Birmingham need to be very concerned. Now I'm going to ask my good friend Linda to come up, because what I want to do is make sure we have time for questions and answers. So Linda, you want to come up, and then I'll step back and...
Okay, sounds great.
You're up, kiddo.
Okay, thank you. Hi. We're glad to be here to talk to you about human trafficking and to develop a dialogue. It's very important, and I want to make sure you can hear me. Sounds good? Okay, good. You know, the world changed a lot in recent years, and a lot of those changes were positive. When the Berlin Wall went down and when the Soviet Union collapsed, those are good things, but the result of that has been a society that has borders that are very porous and hard to protect what goes through those borders, both in terms of drugs and guns and people. And so that's part of the issue that we face. It's a very complicated issue, and I'll tell you how complicated it is. I spent a year working with a group of 6 people last year, reading everything we could get our hands on to understand exactly what the problems were. And this is like 30, 40 hours a week. To understand what the problems were, what was being done, what was working, and what was not working. The average person doesn't have time to spend 30 or 40 hours a week trying to understand all that. So what I've done is I've created a handout, and it is a one-pager, which I want you to take with you. It has a front and a back. And from the people that I've spoken with over the last few months, I have created a list of things that I think key things that you need to know about trafficking, ways that you can get involved, how we can stop this scourge to society. And So I would like, Mary, would you help me distribute these at this time, please?
I'm good at,
Oh, good.
good at distributing.
I would ask that take one per family, if you would, because I was told 60, but it looks like we might have more than that, and that's a good thing.
People who know me know I'm normally passing out the plate for a contribution to the school.
That's so true. Okay, so when you get this handout, it's going to be the basis of what I'm going to talk about tonight. And we're going to actually go through this handout and talk about the things that you can do and the ways that you can get involved. Okay, obviously one of the first things, it's always about the money. That's why I'm in finance. I learned that at a young age, and so every issue that I ever wanted to get involved in, people would end up saying it's about the money, and it is. And so I figured if you wanted to really make a difference, you better know about the money. And so this is no different. So we need money, and we will talk about that. But there are other things that we need to do, and we need you to be aware. First of all, we need to focus on the people that are at greatest risk. And we're going to talk about the fact that it's not just demographic, but there are people who are at greater risk, and that is the runaways, kids in foster care, kids who don't have any kind of a role model at home. They are at the greatest risk of this. And it's been shown that the biggest, most powerful impact will be someone who is a role model for them and can be their mentor. So I would highly suggest that if you're interested in this and if you have some free time, that you get involved as a mentor to some young person at risk. If you have lots of time and lots of energy, you could become a foster parent to one of those kids, or a big brother or a big sister, or get involved with at-risk children through the church. You could have camps and things like that you invite the kids in. The main thing is you need to get to know them, you need to be around them, you need to be there for them and to see them, and they need to see you. There was a pastor, very famous pastor out in LA, Reverend Rivers. He was curious about why the drug traffickers were so much closer to the kids in that community and that they were always together, but they wouldn't come to church. And this one trafficker told him, I'm there when they get up to go to school in the morning, and I'm there when they get out of school, and you're not there. And so one key thing is we have to find ways to penetrate to get into their lives. We need to understand how to identify a potential trafficking situation. And that's a hard thing. And even once you identify it, it is so hard sometimes to take action. And yet it is so hard not to. We need to be aware that places like the hospitality industry, hotels, transportation, trucking, all of those are places where it's very susceptible. Malls, kids hang out in malls. That's a place that traffickers also hang out so that they can get someone. And we need to watch our neighbors. We need to watch the activity that goes on around their home. Do they get a lot of, if you live in a condo, do you have neighbors that get too many people, men coming in and out? Or do you get women that you never see leave the place? They just seem to stay there all the time. When you see a situation that looks questionable, as I saw today, and I was not in a position to do something about it, which will weigh me down for days, when you are in that situation, you can take immediate action. And on your handout, it tells you, call the Human Trafficking Hotline. It is through the Polaris Project. It is 24/7. That number, 1-888-373-7888, call that number. If you see something that's suspicious, they will investigate. Or text, be free, and that's 233-733. Or call 911. Or if it's a sexual situation where you think it's sex trafficking, call the Well House in Birmingham, and I've listed the number for you. To learn more about trafficking, you could spend days on the computer. So I've given you some sites that I think are the best ones for you to go to so that you can learn what you want to know about trafficking. Human Rights First is the best. That's my opinion. That's why I do pro bono work for them. You can get information from humanrightsfirst.org, and you can also make donations there. We need donations. The reason that I love Human Rights First is they are totally logical, non-political, non-religious in their approach, and they are always trying to find the way that will make the greatest impact. And they are, General Krillak introduced me to them, but they are just a phenomenal organization. PolarisProject.org has a lot of good information, and you can also make donations there. I'm going to tell you some things that is going to shake you to your core. While the majority of money is made by sex trafficking, it really is, 2/3 of the victims of trafficking are labor trafficked. Children and men and women, primarily, of course, the largest number are children and women because they're the most vulnerable. But the people who are the reason for those slaves are you and me. And you can find out to what extent you are contributing to that by going to freetowork.org. It's on your list. Go to the website. It asks you about the industry you're interested in, takes you down to the industry, and then it tells you the scorecard for every company, or most companies. And if that scorecard is C or less, don't buy anything from them. However, this particular scorecard will also tell you by industry. And unfortunately, the electronics industry is amazingly, it's very heavy in trafficking. And in fact, if any of you have a smartphone, as though anyone didn't, that was made before 2011, it was made by slaves. Now, there have been changes since then, but that's how bad it was. So it's changing. Things are happening. Another great site is to go on the U.S. Department of Labor's website, which is www.dol.gov. And this is all on your handout. And it will tell you about goods and services that are produced by children or by forced labor. And another one is Slavery Footprint. And I beg you to go on this one, slaveryfootprint.org. It has a little survey that you complete. And that survey is of us. It asks you, you know, what's your life like? What's your lifestyle? What's your house like? What is, you know, what appliances do you use? What devices do you use? And what kind of clothing is in your home? And it tells you how many slaves work for you. I have 48. And I'm not particularly a heavy consumer. It's sad. So please, I beg you to go look at that. It has changed my behavior. I think that it will change anyone's behavior who takes that survey. Another great source of information is the U.S. Department of Labor's annual Trafficking in Persons report. And again, I've given you how to get to that. It ranks countries into tiers based on what they're doing to curb human trafficking, and and whether they're complying with the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which has been revamped and reauthorized several times since then. But of course, the U.S. is in Tier 1. We're the best, but we have a long, long way to go. Even if you're in Tier 1, it's not that it means you're doing everything right. But then you have a Tier 2, which is those countries that are trying but they're making efforts and they're making progress and they're trying to do something about it. Tier 2 watch means that you really aren't doing a whole lot. You are taking actions that is going to put your country more at risk. And Tier 3 means that you're doing nothing to curtail it. And it's stunning how many countries are in Tier 2 watch and Tier 3. So it's important for us to know those things. If you want to read books about trafficking, I've listed 3 that I think are 3 of the best. The Slave Next Door by Kevin Bates. Human Trafficking, A Global Perspective by Louise Shelley. And How You Can Fight Trafficking by Susan Patterson through God's Grace. It's a ministry. And any book for teens by Zach Hunter. They're good. You can, if you don't have time to read a book, go listen to Kevin Bell's TED Talk about trafficking. It's fabulous. And then you can be a savvy consumer. You can know about the companies that are not doing their share. And when you go to these places that I told you about, and you find out the company that you like is not doing their part to stop trafficking, you can write them and let them know that you're not going to use their products anymore until they make some advancement. We have a voice, and we need to use that voice. We can buy fair trade products anywhere we see them. I mean, coffee, tea, even chocolate now, although chocolate's going to take a while. That one, even though Hershey's has agreed by 2020 to have 100% slave-free chocolate, it's going to take longer than that unless the other chocolate companies follow suit, because what happens is, in any of these industries, those companies that start to do fair trade, if we don't buy their product when it's higher than the others, then we've shot them in the foot, and so they can't do it. You have to support it. As I said earlier, check freetowork.org's report and only buy from those companies that are C or higher. If there's a foundation called the Trony Foundation that has a corporate freedom initiative, and they're starting to put a freedom seal in the U.S. It's now in the U.S. and Brazil, I think it is, that this foundation is putting seals where they have approved companies that's passing the freedom seal. So you could look for those things. Use your political power. Alabama's ranking, believe it or not, in the TIP report that I talked about, there's also a ranking of states. And believe it or not, Alabama is in Tier 1, hallelujah. We have a score of 8 out of 12, which is, there's a lot of states, including Mississippi, that have a higher rate than we do. They have 11 out of 12. So we have a way to go. Representative Jack Hawkins of Vestavia introduced a bill this year that would be huge, which was to give us safe harbor legislation in the state. And so there are some bills that are being pushed that would help even further. We need, at the state level, we need more investigative tools. As General Krulak mentioned, we need that everywhere. We've got to have more money for investigation, training for law enforcement, safe harbor laws, and we have to find a way to get people to agree to vacate the sentences for victims that have already been prosecuted for the women. They were the victim, not the perpetrator. Nationally, we need more severe, the general talked about all these, safe harbor laws, more severe penalties, more money for law enforcement. And we need greater financial transparency. Some of you are probably owners of a company. And one of the huge things that we need, and that the general and this group that he co-chairs is working on, is businesses to start to look at their supply chains and make sure that they're transparent, that they know who their suppliers are, that they don't use slaves in the process. And we can, if you own a company, you can have a third-party audit of your supply chain, and you can start to change your buying patterns. General Krulak mentioned tell your kids and tell your grandkids. I'm going to tell you about 3 different kinds of, this is something else that's important for you to remember, also on your handout. There's 3, we identify perpetrators in 3 different ways. There's the guerrilla pimp, who uses force and coercion and often, threatens a family, threatens some member of your family if you don't go along with them, and all these kinds of things, has physical control over the victim and all that. But there's a Romeo pimp, which is very active in your grandchildren's community. And that Romeo pimp is someone who's going to look like your grandchild or your child, who's going to look very well dressed, very nice, good manners, could meet them at the mall, and starts to develop a relationship, and may even buy them nice presents because they are charming this person, and this person starts to trust them, and they're gone. So it's a real issue for us here. CEO pimp is someone who, a lot of times girls get taken because they believe a story about, a fantastic story, but weren't we all young once, about somebody getting you a great interview that you couldn't have gotten on your own. I mean, I'd fall for that at 18. But they actually just do that to get control of this person, and so then they're gone. We need to learn to recognize a victim. And I'm going to tell you some traits of a victim, but they're also in your handout. They're always with someone else. They're controlled by that person. They don't speak for themselves. They usually don't look you in the eye. They are shy and timid. They frequently have bad teeth. And they have no identification, no money. So you can be aware of what to look for. And then I've listed some questions that I would hope you would remember so that once you do spot this, you'll know what to ask these people. You want to know if they can leave their job, or have they been physically harmed? Do they have any control over their life situation? And have they been deprived of food or water or sleep? Do they sleep on the floor or on a bed? Because most of these don't sleep on a bed. And are people forcing you to do things you don't want to do? So I'm going to wrap it up here so that we'll have time for questions. I just want to say one thing, and that is the fight against modern-day slavery is overwhelming. And some days, many days, I have to remind myself of my favorite quote. It is this: I am one person. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. I will not refuse to do the thing I can do. Helen Keller's quote. Thank you.
Now, I know we've given you an awful lot of information.
Y'all continue, and questions, please, you all direct them to either one of the two and ask away.
Yeah.
I did not see any reference made on either side of this page for RICO statute, R-I-C-C-O-H. How would this, would it or will it not support ongoing investigative processes? That
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And that's part and parcel of what we're trying to do, starting at the national level. And so, as you heard, this group that we're working with, and that Linda's been also a part of, is very much at the national level, trying to get our hands around the entire aspect of trafficking. Those instances where we can attack it through the state and through the local, we're doing that also. The support is what I'm trying to get at, is to get the national government to pass the laws, to fund the police departments, and fund this as something as important as the funding that goes towards, say, drug trafficking. And when it's not yet. Yes, ma'am.
Point me to resources for education. I teach in the secondary level.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. Absolutely.
You can go.
I will get with you and do that.
When I talk about the national level, let me just give you. Oh, sorry. She wanted to know if there was some resources for very young children at the age of 2, 3 that we could provide.
Oh, okay.
What? Oh, high
school. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I thought you said. Okay, high school.
In fact, we have in this group that General Krulak co-chairs Ken Morris, and he is the great-great-great-grandchild of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandchild of George
Washington Carver.
Have I got those great?
You got it. You got it.
And he's leading an educational effort, and I will send you some information on that, which is very helpful.
Yes, sir.
Is there a connection between the drug culture, the gang culture, and human trafficking?
Okay, the question is there a connection between the gang culture and human trafficking? There's a connection between gangs, drugs, and human trafficking. In many instances, the gang is a member of the gang could be the initial procurer. They could certainly be the one who conducts the movement, gets in the car, drives them to a location. All of that is interconnected, and that's what makes it so difficult. Just to give you an idea of one of the things that we're doing so that you understand the intricacy of how we're trying to attack this problem. And I used it just the other day in a description. We're trying to get Donna Shalala as part of this group. And she was asking some questions, and I said, we've gotten to the point where we use the credit card and the fraud aspects of a credit card. We asked one of the major banks, I won't mention which one, to allot us a certain amount of time. And they gave us that time, and what we wanted to do was we pinpointed an area within one of the major cities in America. And we pinpointed businesses within that area in a time frame. We took nail salons from 11 o'clock at night until 4 o'clock in the morning. And we wanted every card that was swiped for a flat $100, which is the cost of a sexual act that we know about. And sure enough, they popped up a whole bunch of these. We then focused. We knew where they were coming from. We knew the nail salon. We got a hold of the police. They raided it, and sure enough, they found trafficking and sexual ring going on. Grabbed those people. That's the kind of national level support from the banking industry, the trucking industry, police, that we're trying to put together to support what's going to happen down here in Birmingham. There's just not enough for the mayor or the police department here to say, okay, we're going to do this. They don't have the money. This has got to come, the federal government does have an allocation of money. It's just got to get down to the people who can make the best use of it. We had a question. Yes, sir.
How long, General, has it been a $150 billion business? What was it, say, 5, 10, 15 years ago?
I'll tell you, this has been so new, the type of focus that's on it right now, that I honestly could not answer that question. It's obviously building at a very rapid rate, though. I mean, it's 150 billion to this year. I mean, next year it could be 155 billion. It is not going down. It's increasing. It is going to overtake the drug trade.
Mike?
Yeah.
Just an observation, a lot of that increase is probably due to the advent of the internet and mobile.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The comment was the impact of the internet, technology, Twitter, you name it. It's attractive. It's a way to communicate. It's a way to certainly communicate with your grandchildren and your children. Yes, sir.
If a person is taken in Birmingham, will they probably be used in another country or just in another part of the U.S.?
Mostly in the U.S. But can I follow up on that? I want to say one thing, and that is that we talked about kids at risk. When a child runs away, 1 out of 3 of those will be trafficked within 3 days. Will be trafficked within 48 hours. Once they're trafficked, their life expectancy is 3 to 7 years. They will die from either being beaten or
drugs.
AIDS or drugs. They're drugged heavily. And so, and when you say taken, it's very important to remember they are taken like that. But most of them stay in the U.S. that are taken here. Yes?
Can you tell us a local story of someone who has been abducted that you know of? Sort of bringing it.
They're going to get that from the
Here,
well.
what you
You're
need,
gonna get,
I think that actually Mary is going to bring the film 8 Days to your church.
Yeah.
Not next week, but as soon as we can get it.
Good.
Yeah.
And that is the best film. We saw it a few months ago, and it's outstanding, but it does take a local example and shows you what happened.
Marty will be here next week.
Yes, you'll have somebody.
With Trafficking, she'll share from her own experience.
Yes, good.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, in your conversations, you use the term, I get, like, it's all female, but is there not males
That's not
in
true.
the trafficking?
No, it's not just female. It's male. They're to include young children, boys sex trafficking, as well as obviously the slaves, those that are laborers. There are a great many males that are involved in that.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, in the very back.
Yes, I work for the United Methodist Children's Home. We have had some sex trafficked children on I-10 that we have taken in. What is being done with the local DHR or FFN in Florida with what you're doing?
What are we doing with those? That's where the people involved in our group from law enforcement will be involved with those kinds of groups. We started this, we had a kickoff meeting in January 28th and 29th, and those people are now getting organized to go out and contact those various units.
We have people from all states involved, legal, and one of the things that I think is what I found very interesting was the number of people who have, once they heard that this organization was going, have begun coming out of the woodwork wanting to become a part of it.
Mike?
Yeah.
To what extent in the Tier 2, Tier 3 countries are corrupt politicians and perhaps law enforcement blocking?
Yeah, I'll let you speak to that.
I mean, that's obviously that's the biggest problem. Corrupt politicians, law enforcement that are blocking it. That is the difficulty.
Is there part of your effort to somehow spotlight them?
Yes,
Oh, definitely.
that's what Interpol's doing in Europe right now. In other words, we are trying to put the spotlight on those individual states, organizations that are not stepping up. One of the things that I'm very proud of is that the military and our procurement system has now decided to take this idea of who's building what, and they are absolutely like following a rabbit down a rabbit hole to determine, are these items that are being procured for the United States military made by slaves? And they're making remarkable progress in stopping that.
And that is huge because that's a huge purchaser. But also, I am convinced another important one will be when we get all of education doing the same thing, to start to look at who those suppliers are, higher ed, secondary, and all the way down.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you define the labor slave? What does that look like?
The labor place, well.
What does that person look like that's a slave in labor?
Okay, well, let me give you. Well, let me give you an example that's very clear here in the United States, and is one of the big bugaboos we have, and that is you have ambassadors who bring over to the United States a slave, or one or two or three slaves that service the compound. You see them, we know them, we can't get at them. That's one example. The example is also in our own communities where you have somebody that you think is coming to work in your house. They're going to mow your lawn, or they're going to do, and you're getting them from somebody who comes around and says, we have this labor, and if you'd like to have somebody mow your lawn, etc., and you say absolutely, and you pay the money, and the individual comes out supervised. They're going to promise you he's going to be supervised, don't worry. He's a slave. He's not being supervised, he's being held captive.
Those are great examples, and another good example, and I'm not saying this is true of all of them, because there are a lot of house cleaning services that send people out in groups, but that is a common way that they do that, is to send the women out. There's one woman who's in charge, and there's four in the group, and they keep the women from talking. Especially in societies that have a lot of Ukrainians, that's very common.
I would think it may be less in Hispanic cleaning groups. Is that true or not?
It's less. I don't know.
Yeah,
how
the
much
question
it
was, is it less in Hispanic working groups? And I don't know whether it is less or not. I would just simply say, if they're coming and they're supervised, be wary. You want the supervision, but talk to the people. Are they willing to talk to you?
Yes.
Hola.
You mentioned a series of questions to ask these people, but it was after you said they're almost always supervised.
Yeah. You have to try to get, go ahead.
How do you get to them to ask those questions?
The question is, ask them questions, how do you get them away from other people? If you're in the healthcare industry, you have a great opportunity because this is an asset to the PERP. And so they will take them for medical care. And often in an office, a setting like that, you get a chance to get them away from the PERP. You have to say things like, we have to do an x-ray now and we have to take her away or take him away. But once you do, you can start to ask them these questions. It's important if there's somebody cleaning your house that you find a way to just kind of they're perhaps in one room, you start a casual conversation. Notice whether they actually will respond to you or not, or if they seem afraid to answer. So you have to be very cautious how you do it. But also it'll be very telling if you aren't able to get them alone, because that also says a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
I read an article that you wrote that you said that 800,000 people a year. It's increasing, human trafficking by 800,000 people a year. Has that increased?
Yes. And we know that approximately 200,000 young people, young youth of America, are at risk. Yes.
It's my understanding that a lot of the victims, particularly the young girls, if they're rescued, and that's a big if you're able to get them, of their own accord, they go back because they can't adjust to society. And I've talked direct with one victim, and it seems like there ought to be something we can do to help them adjust better, because if we're lucky enough to get them, we've got to keep them.
Absolutely.
You're exactly right, and a lot of work is being done at the local levels, and you're going to have a talk by one of the group, Wellhouse, and they're doing a wonderful job, and that's vital. What I'm trying to do and what our group is trying to do is not let it happen. Not let it happen. I mean, you have got to go get these people. In the back?
I know that you said if they are taken in America, they typically are going to stay in America, just somewhere else. Do we have a large import problem? Do we bring in a lot of human trafficking from other countries?
Yes, we do. The question was, do we have an import problem along with our own internal problem? And the answer is absolutely. They come across from, a lot of them coming from Mexico. But understand, although the majority will stay in the United States, there is still a significant percentage who will go overseas.
One thing that I wanted to add to the question that you asked was, never mind. I think that's I was on a different trail. Never mind, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was stationed over in Germany.
Yes.
And I've lived over there for 10 years. And over there in Europe, they don't, like these brothels, they just advertise it like it's nothing. And pretty much most percent of the women come from Eastern Europe.
Yes.
Or women that obviously have low self-esteem and don't know what else to do to try to make a living. So my question is, since, U.S. military is over there, I mean, why don't we even do something about it over there?
See, what was the question again?
The military is over there.
Yes.
And it's really bad over there. It's way worse than it is here.
Yes.
To where it's just accepted openly and Europeans look the other way.
Absolutely. That's why in this group, the basically the head of Interpol is a member of this group, because that is an issue. That 20.9 million people, they're not all Americans. The vast majority of them are not Americans. But it is an issue that we've got to attack.
Yeah, well, one of my questions is, where I was at, in Schweinfurt, Germany, we had big military presence.
Yes.
And that place has probably the most brothels in all of Europe, something like 60. And I don't understand why, like, say, U.S. military, along with the local authorities, did something to just close all those places down.
How about keeping the guys from going?
Well, I wonder, how do we change a culture that supports the idea of using women or men vying for sex? How do we stop people from thinking that that's
Go ahead now. Then I'll
Okay, here's what I would say to you. That goes back to what General Krulak said, why we are approaching this problem as we are. You're pointing at this from different levels. Like you're saying, why not go close down the brothels? Why not get the Johns, although we call them paying rapists? And but that's not where we're going. We are in a group that is trying to look at, based on everything we've read, what will make the impact. And the impact is you have to flip the risk-reward. And you can only do that by making it risky, and the money can't be good. And so we're not trying to stop demand. We're not really, we're not even trying to stop prostitution. If a person is not underage, we as a group do not take a position on that. It is, are they in forced labor or forced sexual activity? And so your question is great. There will be people you can ask that about more informed than we are. But I just want you to know that that's the reason we chose the path we're going, is we think we can make the biggest difference.
We've watched the other path. Unfortunately, to say to, a soldier, or to say to mankind, okay, you're not going to do that anymore. That's a great thing, and that's a great aspiration. What I'm trying to do, what I've done all my life, is I focus like a raven on a roadkill. I focus on what I think is the issue, and in this instance, it is a business. It is a business that has great reward, little risk, and our effort is to disrupt the business of human trafficking. And supporting us, and us supporting them, is those people at the state and local level who are hopefully going to get the monetary support. We passed 12 laws in November at the national level. Tell me any other organization that's ever gotten 12 laws passed in Congress in 1 month. We did it. This little group did it. So we are going to make a difference. But at the end of the day, we're up here trying to support what's down here.
Yeah.
What about with adoption in that industry, nationally and internationally?
That is
I just watched Philomena or whatever, and
yeah.
I suggest everybody ought to watch that. But that was 40 years ago, true story, and I think that's trafficking.
That is a growing problem, is trafficking babies. And so that is
very
involved.
Profitable.
Very, very profitable.
Russia and get a baby, or wherever, how would you know that that's what you're getting to?
I don't think you
have to go through you better make sure you're in a reputable agency.
That's a risky habit that Americans are comfortable doing, and that's like,
if they go through a reputable organization, they can feel fairly comfortable that they're going to get
identified some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through.
You could have that checked out. I mean,
I'm not adopting a baby.
I noticed your husband was looking at you strangely.
I didn't ever even look at that as a possible way to traffic humans. It's forcing women to give up babies for adoption.
It's becoming bigger and bigger, and another one that's growing is the trafficking of human organs.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you introduced or considered introducing legislation for the banking industry? It seems just as your credit card deal investigation was fruitful. I know of a case here in Birmingham a few years ago where a banking officer recognized that there were large cash deposits being made late at night, and they followed that money trail, and it was a case of human trafficking.
That's exactly what we're doing.
With computerization, it is so much easier for banks to identify people that are trying to money launder.
Absolutely.
It just seems like such an obvious way to attack them.
And like I said, that's exactly what we're doing. That's why we have the CEOs of all the major banks in America involved in this, because with technology, with fraud identification, with large deposits at strange times, they're all signals.
And as you said, they're much easier to track than they've ever been.
Yeah.
You had a question?
What mode of transportation are these people using to come through our interstates here in Alabama?
Every mode. I will just tell you right now, I would ask everybody to just watch Talladega on race weekend, because I can tell you that there's trafficking going on, there's the sex trade going on. We will have people down there, but it's that type of thing. You have a big sporting event. Cindy McCain was working with us just a month or two ago because of the Super Bowl out in Arizona. I mean, it is big groups like that where these men that are just who you're talking about are there. They're without their wives. They're there for a great weekend, and it's a terrible time. And it's those types of organizations, it's that type of location where our group is working hard to pass the intelligence. Just like you have a military intelligence, there's intelligence going back and forth to try to identify the locations, identify the types of vehicles that will be used, campers, RVs, buses.
They can be transported in many, many different ways. Trucking, I mean, there are lots of ways they can be transported. We're working with the airline industry, for instance, to try to get more airlines to be cognizant and train their employees, because a lot of them are flown. Not in your case through Birmingham, but nationally.
But if you look at the truck stops on I-20 and I-65 and just see how many trucks are lined up, and then just watch, we're talking about, you know, keeping your eyes and ears open. Yeah. Look for, say, a van parked alongside a truck stop with a bunch of trucks at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can rest assured what's going on there. And so our local police are watching that. The highway patrol are watching that.
What was it you saw today, can you say?
Well, I'm a walker, and so I was walking a few miles today, and I came upon a couple, an African-American young woman and a Hispanic male who was clearly showing force against her, and he saw me, and she didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. But it's like he wanted to turn and go the other way, and she turned back, and he was really violent toward her and made her keep going. It was the behavior that made me think, but I was not in a position where I could really do anything about it. Yes?
What can you do if you see something like that?
If I'd had my phone, I could have called someone and said, I see these people. I could have called one of those numbers I gave you, and I could have said, this is where I am. I feel that this is a threat. This is what I saw. And, you know, can you check into this for me?
Close enough, take a picture?
Take a picture. I took a picture at the airport of an incident that was reported to the authorities of two young men from South America flying without, they were young, like 14, and they were flying without anybody with them. And you have to pay extra to get people to fly by themselves. at that age, and I was so suspicious that I called my niece from Dallas and said, I want somebody to meet at the airport to look at these people to be sure, because they didn't speak any English. They came from the small little hamlet down there, or, you know, and so it's very unlikely they were here for any other reason.
I would encourage everybody to come to the next 3 meetings. I mean, I think that this is so powerful and so important that you all as a church body have come together to take this on.
Absolutely.
I mean, God bless you all for doing it. It's so important. Thank you very much.